Hello and welcome to the Beach House 34 podcast. I'm your host, Christine Worth. A warm welcome to all the new subscribers. Your support is so appreciated. If you are not yet subscribed, especially on the YouTube channel, please hit that like button and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a thing and it helps the channel so much. If you are here, you know that I've covered the Darlie Routier trial transcripts from the very beginning, and we are now on part 3 of Darlie Routier's testimony, where the prosecution begins to question Darlie about her statements to the police, what was said or not said in the 911 call, and more. So let's continue with part 3 of Darlie Routier's testimony. And the cross-examination is begun by Mr. Toby Shook. Mrs. Routier, you started that business, Testnet, with your husband. Is that right? Yes, sir. Okay. And you worked there alongside him through the years when y'all were building it up, didn't you? Pretty much so, yes. Okay. I mean, it wasn't his operation. You took equal part in that company and built it up with him, didn't you? Sure. And you ran, in fact, I think your main primary job in that was running the books. Is that right? Pretty much, to a certain degree. I mean, we had a CPA, but the daily routine, the daily work, you would keep up with that. And as far as accounts go and who owed you money and things like that, more or less the business operation, yes, sir. You also helped make some of the computer parts or whatever you did there, the circuit boards. Yeah, I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I tried to help out wherever I could, wherever they needed me. And even when you quit working there as much, you still went up there on a weekly basis, did you not? Yeah, I would stop in. Okay, and you still helped with the books if they needed it? Well, at that time, I usually brought the books home, but yeah, I mean, I did the books, but I did it at home. You would work at home with the business? Yes, sir. And every day you discussed what was going on with the business with your husband, did you not? Pretty much. And the decisions made in the business, those were made by Darren and yourself? At that part, I would have to say more of it was Darren than me, but I mean, I knew about it. You certainly had input in it, didn't you? Sometimes. That is why you discussed that even on the night of the 5th, y'all were talking about the business? Yes, sir. Okay. And you did all this while you were running the home also? Yes, sir. And as far as the home goes, you were the one that decided decorating the home, making purchases for the home, how it looked, and that kind of thing. Did you not? Well, most of it, yes. And you would keep the house up and keep it clean and that kind of thing? Yeah, I had help. When did you start getting help with the house? Well, actually, I had had a maid service for quite some time. When did that start? I don't have any exact date for you. I can say approximately 2 years ago. Okay. And would they come in every week? Yes, sir. Okay. And then, of course, the week of the you had Babsia come in for a couple of days. Yeah, if I can explain. The people that I was having clean, they had changed to a bunch of different people and they weren't doing as good of a job as what they normally would do. And so I had let them go and I had another lady come in and clean and she was very nice, but every time she cleaned, she ended up breaking something and it ended up costing me more money to have her clean than what she was breaking. So you were having people then coming in for the last 2 years helping you clean? Yes, sir. Did you have some of these teenage girls help you watch over the kids? Well, I wouldn't necessarily say watch over the kids. I think that was kind of an excuse that they used to be in the house. Okay. I mean, they really didn't want to say that they were coming over to be with, a 5 and 6-year-old. So let me ask you, you said that Darren fixed the gate that Wednesday night? Yes, sir, he did. Did you go try the gate out yourself? No, I didn't. Are you telling this jury then that the gate was swinging freely? I don't know if it was swinging or not. All I know is Darren told me that he fixed it. The gate was hanging on hinges by shoestrings and coat hangers and things like shoestrings. Yeah. Have you seen the photographs? No, sir. Had you all been making some repairs to that gate? Yes, sir. Put some new poles in? My husband, I think, did. I'm not too sure about that. Okay. Do you know when those poles were put in? No, sir. I couldn't tell you that. Let me show you 13-D, 13-C. Can you see that gate there? Yes, sir. Do you see the strings attached from the poles to the gate? Yes, on that one I do. I see it. Okay. I don't know if it's a shoestring, but it looks like some type of string. Some type of string? Yes, sir. The same thing in this photograph? Yes, sir. Okay, but the gate was dragging. Was that the problem? Yeah, the bottom of the gate. Okay. And I don't know anything about the poles, really. I just know about the gate. Did you go out that gate on the date of the 5th? Did I go out the gate? Yes. No, sir, I did not. You were home all day, weren't you? Yes, sir, I was. Had you been having trouble getting through that gate? Yes, sir, we had. Okay. Would you have to actually, lift the gate up and try to put it in the air to keep it from dragging on the concrete? Sort of. It drug. You kind of had to. I think one of the officers described it a good way as kind of pushing your foot. Right. That was Sergeant Walling. He had to shove his foot to shove the gate open. Yes, sir. Okay. So it was no easy task getting in and out of that gate, was it? I wouldn't say it was easy, but I wouldn't say it was hard. Well, if you knew what you were doing, it would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Well, I would think that anybody really, me and my boys got it open. They had been in and out of it several times. Sure. And you knew how to get in and out of it, didn't you? Yeah, I don't think it takes too much to know how to get in and out of it. Okay. And the vacuum cleaner was where? The vacuum cleaner was beside the kitchen bar. Okay. In the den side. Is that where you normally keep the vacuum cleaner? No, sir. Where do you normally keep that vacuum cleaner? Normally, I keep the vacuum cleaner in the cherry wood room. There was another vacuum cleaner there, I think, at the time. What is the cherry wood room? I'm sorry, I don't know what y'all call it. The front living area. Okay. The very front one in there in the house. Okay. When you come into the house, yes, you go to the left. You go to the left? Yes, sir. And you keep it in there? Yes, sir. Okay. You come in the entryway. You are talking about what is labeled the living room right here. That is where you keep your vacuum cleaner? Usually, yes, sir. Every day. That is where we would find the vacuum cleaner. Well, not every day. Sometimes it would be upstairs. I have two vacuum cleaners. Well, do you have closets in the house? Not very many. There's one closet in the house, one hallway closet. As far as clothes closets, there's a couple. And so the vacuum cleaners, they don't fit in any of the closets. They have to be out all the time. I guess you could try to fit them in there. Well, you keep a pretty neat house, don't you? To a certain extent. Yes, sir. I mean, you are pretty famous for having a very neat house, aren't you? I like to keep a neat home, but you don't put your vacuum cleaners away? Well, it wasn't like an important thing that I made sure that I put my vacuum cleaner away. And that night, I guess, when you were lying on the couch then, the vacuum cleaner was against the bar over there? Yes, sir. I had been vacuuming. Okay. And you talked about this gangster rap song. That was your son's favorite song? It was both of my sons, one of their favorite songs. And you don't believe that they could have understood the words to it? I don't think so. Do you know the words to it? No. Okay. I know the verse, the main chorus verse, but I don't know all the words to it. No. Okay. You had said that. Well, let's talk about your diary for a moment. Okay. Now you got that diary in 95? I believe so. Okay. And you made what, 4 or 5 entries in it over a few months period? I think so. I don't know if I had read 4 or 5, something like that. Well, most of the pages are blank, aren't they? Yes, sir. But finally, at the end there, on the 3rd of May, is when you write this. Now, you say you weren't going to commit. No, sir. You were just feeling real moody. I was feeling somewhat depressed and moody. Okay. I mean, I think they kind of go together. How long had you been feeling moody? I don't know. It had been a few days. Okay. And what time of the day was it that you started writing this note? I started writing the note. I think it was like, I want to say like around 3 o'clock or 3:30. Did you have pills out by you? By the note? Just out? No, sir. They were in a drawer. They were in a drawer? Yes, sir. You didn't take the pills out at all? No, sir. We took the pills out later to throw them down the toilet, to flush them down the toilet. Had you thought about taking the pills? I think I was thinking about it while I was writing the letter. Yes, sir. To kill yourself? To think about it. Well, you were going to the trouble of writing this letter, right? Yes, sir, I did. And I also went to the trouble of stopping because I realized that I didn't want to do that. I mean, the first line in here is, quote, I hope that one day you will forgive me for what I am about to do. What were you about to do? I was contemplating. Pretty seriously? If it would have been seriously, I wouldn't be here today. Well, you are writing a note. Yes, sir. Quote, I hope that one day you will forgive me for what I am about to do. Unquote. Yes, sir. And you have got the pills. I mean, that's the way you were going to do it, right? Take pills? That's what I was thinking about. And you were going to the trouble of writing this note? Yes, sir. So we're talking about some pretty serious contemplation, aren't we? Yes, sir. But you also have to consider that I stopped in the middle of that note and called my husband because I had decided that I wasn't going to do that and that it was silly. Now, why were you so desperate at that point in your life, 1 month before these murders, that you were thinking about committing? I cannot answer that question for you. Do you have amnesia about that? No, sir. You don't have traumatic amnesia about why you were so desperate to think about committing? No, sir, I don't. But you didn't purchase those pills while you were contemplating it? No. Okay. Those had just been lying around the house? They had been in a box in the house. Okay. How long had they been there? How long had they been what? In the house? Right. For quite some time. Okay. Do you remember the first time that you met with your psychiatrist on the 20th of June? She asked you about your thinking about Lisa? Yes, I guess so, sir. You don't have any other psychiatrists, do you? No, sir. Okay. Well, I mean, there was different people that talked to me in the jail. Okay. Do you remember telling her that you thought about actually bought over-the-counter pills, wrote note, but knew she couldn't, and called husband? Yes, sir. Okay. So you told her that you actually bought over-the-counter pills? I had bought over-the-counter pills for the purpose of taking them to commit. No, sir. I did not buy the pills that day. If that is, I mean, what you are asking, I'm not sure. So you felt bad enough on the 3rd of May to sit down and contemplate how you would kill yourself, write a note, and then decided to call your husband? Yes, sir. I guess you were not very happy with your life at that point. Well, I was feeling pretty depressed. Have you ever thought about committing suicide at any other time in your life? No, sir. You said that you mentioned on your direct testimony about being molested a little by your stepfather. Stepfather. What's his name? Denny. Okay. And that happened when? How old were you? The first time I was 8 years old. Okay. And where is he now? He lives, I'm not exactly sure what the name of the place is, but it's a little bit further outside of Terrell on one of those little tiny drive-through towns. Okay. When is the last time you saw him? The last time I saw him, I believe, was on Mother's Day. He came over to pick up Danielle, my little sister. That is Mother's Day of this last year, 1996, right? Yes, sir. Which would have been how close to the murder? Well, I don't know. About 3 weeks, maybe. Okay. It's in May, right? Mother's Day is. Yes, sir. Okay. And in fact, on that date, you gave him David and Devin and let them go with him to his home to stay for a couple of days. Didn't you? For a day. For one day? Yes, sir. This is the man that you? Yes, sir. And you let him have your children? Yes, sir. Can I explain that? Just answer my question. I mean, if your lawyer here wants to you explain it, he can have you do that. Okay, that is fine. Okay. And how long were they gone? A day. Okay. Incidentally, as far as that accusation of the police were never called, were they? No, sir. I was 8 years old. Okay. When did your mother divorce him? I think I was about 17 when she got the actual, maybe 18, which no, when she got the actual divorce from Denny, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. But on that Mother's Day, your children were with him? Yes, sir. After Mother's Day. Is that your usual practice, not to have your children with you on Mother's Day? No, they were with me half of the day. Okay, so that is not unusual practice not to be with your children on Mother's Day. No, sir. Well, in 95 and in 94, you weren't with your children on Mother's Day, were you? On Mother's Day? Yes. In 94 and to 95? Yes. Where was I? Well, weren't you out kind of celebrating with your friends on those Mother's Day? Oh, are you talking about the night before Mother's Day? Well, the little party that you planned, right? Sure. Okay. I mean, that was kind of an annual event with you to go partying with some other women on Mother's Day, wasn't it? All mothers. Yes, sir. Okay. You call that Mother's Day out? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, incidentally, did you attend church regularly with your boys? No, sir. Okay. The silly string party, as I guess it's come to be known? Yes, sir. You are saying that was not your idea? No, sir, it was not. Okay. Did you not go around the neighborhood telling all the kids and parents that they needed to come to this party? I called everybody. Yes, sir, I did. I mean, you did that, didn't you? Yes, sir. I mean, you were physically walking around the neighborhood, going around knocking on doors and telling parents that they needed to bring their kids to a couple of their friends' house. I did. Okay. And this is while the police still had custody of your house. Is that right? Yes, sir. And you were walking around the neighborhood knocking on doors? I was not walking around the neighborhood. I went to 3 homes. Okay. And were you on some type of drugs or something at the silly string party? I had not been taking as much medication as what I was, but yes, I was still on some. Are you trying to blame your behavior, shooting silly string, laughing and giggling on any medication? No, I am not blaming my behavior. I don't think there is anything to blame. Okay. And the silly string wasn't your idea. Is that right? No, sir. But yours certainly didn't mind spraying it and things like that, did you? I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And then you saw Joe Munoz out there with the camera? Yes, he was. And you talked to him at quite a great length, didn't you? Yes, he came over to the grave. You didn't mind talking to him on camera, did you? Well, actually, in the beginning, I didn't want to, but then later on, yes, I did. You warmed up to him pretty quick, didn't you? Yes, he is a very nice man. Well, you can kind of tell that from watching the videotape. He was very nice. In fact, it's on that videotape that you say that this killer went to your children first, then tried to come to you. Yes, sir. But he had to go to them first? That's what I said. Okay. Well, were you just imagining that is what happened and assuming what had happened? Well, I think we have all assumed that that is what happened. Okay, so you don't remember that? No, sir. You were just making that statement? Yes, because you figured that is probably what happened. We all figured that that is what happened. Now, how long had the window been up in the garage? Can you be a little bit more specific? Well, did you usually keep that window locked? This point of entry? We didn't usually keep it locked all the time. Usually it was kept open and down. I mean, it was off and on. It wasn't always up, but it wasn't always down. Why did you keep it open? I kept it open when we had cats out there and when we would breed them. Okay. And was it open on the day of the 5th? I believe it was open some. And had you been keeping it open for that entire week? I'm not sure about that. As a matter of fact, I think I had shut it a couple of times during the week. When had you shut it? I couldn't tell you, sir. But you know that it was open on Wednesday. Is that right? I know it was open on Wednesday? Yes, I believe so. And that was because you had cats out there. Is that right? No, sir. Why was that? It was just open. I just remember it being open when I had gone out into the garage. Okay. So it's clear your husband, Darren, didn't commit this offense, did he? No, he didn't. I mean, you know that for a fact, don't you? Yes, sir. This jury can remove that issue from their minds whatsoever, that Darren Routier did not kill your sons? Yes, sir. The man you saw walking away was not your husband? Yes, sir. You saw that man go out into the garage. Is that right? Out through the utility room into the garage. And after that, you are wide awake down in the kitchen and then in the Roman room and in the hallway. Well, not wide awake at first, but yes, I did become wide awake. Well, there is no way that if that had been Darren, that he could have snuck in the house and gotten back upstairs and then come back down. No, I don't think so. So we can put that issue aside. The murderer of your children is not your husband? Yes, sir. Okay. So what it comes down to is the murderer is either this man who crept into your house and murdered your children and attacked you, or you are the murderer. Sir, that has got to be one of two ways, doesn't it? Sir, I did not murder my children. It's got to be one of two ways. I did not murder my children, sir. So it was this man who crept into your house? Yes, sir, it was. Okay. Now, at the time that this happened, did you feel stalked in any way? At the time of the murders? At the time that it happened? Yes, on the 5th. I didn't think about it. I mean, being stalked after it happened? No, I'm talking about before. Not really stalked. I mean, we had had some phone calls and stuff, but I never really gave it a whole lot of thought. And had Darren told you that your neighbor Karen had told you about this car that was watching your house? No, sir, he didn't tell me that. He hadn't told you that? No, sir. So the only indication that you had of anyone after you maybe were these phone calls. Is that right? At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but yes, sir. Okay. And at this point, there is a very short 10-minute break. Everybody is now back into the courtroom and the questioning resumes. Over the break, you were able to consult with your attorneys again, were you not, Mrs. Routier? They told me something. Okay. You were able to talk with them there over the break? Yes. They told me that I didn't ask you what they said. Yes, sir, I was. I just wanted to know if you were able to talk to them. Yes, sir. Okay. I'll try to keep my questions real simple. Okay? Okay. Now, apparently, this man who crept into your house in the early morning hours of the 6th was able to murder your children, wound you, and leave the one witness that could put him on death row. I think that he thought I was dead. Okay. He left the one witness who could cause his conviction and put him on death row alive. Again, I think he thought I was dead. Well, were you not moving or something? I don't remember that much, sir. Then how would you know he would think that you were dead? Because he was walking away from me. And you were just laying there? Yes. I mean, he had to get close enough for you to be able to identify him, wouldn't he, Mrs. Routier? I would think so. Okay, well, I mean, you have got your throat cut. He has to do that. He has to get right up on you, doesn't he? Yes, sir. Face to face? Yes, sir. Okay. And has to be in that room while your children are. Yes, sir. Let me ask you this. Do you think that you slept while that man your boys? I have no idea. Well, do you think you could have slept through that? I don't know how to answer that because I don't know. Well, you are a light sleeper, aren't you? I wouldn't necessarily call it a light sleeper. Well, don't you wake up whenever the baby moves in his crib? Yes, sir, but that is not exactly a real light noise. So when your baby rolls over, you wake up. His crib is on a hardwood floor and it has rollers on it. And when he wiggles and moves, it shakes the whole crib. And it makes, it's a pretty loud noise. And that is why you were sleeping downstairs, right? It's one of the reasons, yes. That is what you put in your voluntary statement, did you not? Yes, sir. No one forced you to write that down, did they? No, sir. This is in your handwriting? Yes, sir. Okay. And don't you say, quote, I had been sleeping on the couch the past week or so off and on because the baby slept in our room in the crib, and when he moved, he woke me up? Yes, sir. Okay, so you are a light sleeper, aren't you? To some degree. And how close would you say Damon was to you when you went to sleep? How close was Damon? Yes. How close was he to you? He was very close. Within 1 foot, wasn't he? Pretty much so. Yes. Easily 1 foot lying right there beside you. Yes, on the floor. Do you think that you could have slept through a man him 4 times in the back? Again, I have no idea. Well, you know yourself pretty good. Do you think that you could have slept through that? Sir, I cannot answer that. I cannot remember. Do you think you could have slept when this man stabbed your 7-year-old, Devin? I can't answer that question. He was only about 4 or 5 feet away from you, wasn't he? Yes, he was. Well, you are a mother, aren't you? Yes, sir, I am. And aren't they able to tell when their children are in trouble? I would like to think so. Aren't they known for being able to hear those noises from an instinct? Have that instinct? Yes, sir. So don't you think that you would have woken up if a man started stabbing you? I have no idea of what happened that night. Well, certainly you would have woken up when he started beating you, wouldn't you? I have assumed that that is what happened. Yes, sir. I mean, you would have to be awake to take a beating like that. I would assume so. Yes, sir. And it's your arms that were beaten, weren't they? As far as I know. Yes, sir. Okay. You weren't hit in the face. That's for sure. Were you? Directly in the face? Yes. We can't see any bruises on your face, can we? No, sir. Okay. And you weren't stabbed in your face, were you? Not stabbed. There were marks on my face. You weren't beaten in the chest, stomach, back, or anything like that? I have no idea. Well, did you ever see any bruises in your chest, in your back? Not bruises, but there was a mark on my breast. But no bruises? No bruises. Okay. You didn't complain to the doctors about a big headache, being whacked in the head, or bumps on the head? Actually, I did complain about feeling pain. I didn't complain specifically in what areas. I was hurting all over from head to toe. Certainly, you are not going to wake up, or are going to wake up when he cut your throat, aren't you? I have no idea. I would assume so. You wouldn't sleep through that, would you? I don't know what happened. I would assume so, but I cannot remember. Do you really think that you could have slept when the man cut your throat? I don't think so. You couldn't have slept when you got stabbed in the arm either, could you? I don't think so. Okay. And if you had woken up when your children were attacked, you would have screamed, wouldn't you? Unless my mouth was covered. Well, I guess, are there more than one man attacking you? I have no idea, sir. If there was just one guy, he can only do one thing at a time, can't he? Well, you only saw one man, didn't you? I only saw one man. Yes, sir. Okay, walking away from you? And if there is just one man attacking your kids and you saw him, you would jump up and defend your children, wouldn't you? I would think so, but again, I cannot remember. You would think you would get up? Yes, sir. And defend your children? Yes, sir. Don't you know you would do that? Yes, sir. I mean, you would defend them with your life, wouldn't you? Yes, sir. If you saw a man attacking your children, you would scream your head off, wouldn't you? Yes, sir, unless my mouth was covered. You would scream for your husband, wouldn't you? Unless my mouth was covered. Yes, sir. You didn't have any problems screaming for him when he finally got up and came down there, did you? My mouth was not covered. Did you find any tape or any gauze or anything stuffed in your mouth that showed it to be covered? No, just except for that it was torn up inside. Okay, it was all torn up inside. Well, it felt raw. Did you talk to the doctors about that? I talked to the nurse about that. Yes, I did. There is no way you could have prevented from defending your children and sounding the alarm if you had seen them being attacked. What do you mean? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Well, if you had woken up and some man is your children, you would have tried to stop him, wouldn't you? Yes, sir. Okay. But you have no memory of any of that. No, sir. You must have been beaten first, wouldn't you say? Sir, I have no idea. I have sat for 7 months and tried to think of every possible thing I could think of what this man did to me. Okay? I don't remember. You don't know if you were stabbed first or you were beaten on the arms first? I have no idea. I don't remember. And what is the description that you remember? The best description that you have of this man? It's not much. He was a taller man with dark hair. Okay, let's start with that. How tall was he? I cannot give you an exact, I can just tell you that he was above, I would think above 6 foot. Okay, above 6 foot? Yes, sir. And I believe you said that he was along Chris Frosch's build. Is that right? Yes, sir. Are you talking about height-wise? Built-wise. Okay. And I haven't seen Chris Frosch I have just seen him in dress clothes, but he seems to be about the same build. Okay. So he is the same height and build as this man that was walking away? Well, approximately. Okay. So the man is over 6 foot, you would say. Yes, sir. And he was a white male? I don't know that for sure. Okay. What kind of hair did he have? He had longer hair. How long was it? Like here. Okay. Whatever you call that. To his collar? Yes. What color was it? Well, as far as I could tell, it was dark because it was dark in there. Okay. And the build he was built like Chris Frosch? To some degree, yes, sir. Okay. Well, to what degree was he not? Sir, you are asking me to be specific about something that I cannot be specific about. Okay. And you saw his back, and that was all? Yes, sir. As he walked away? Yes, sir. You didn't yell out, Darren, when you saw this man walking in your house? Actually, it happened all so quick. I did yell out for Darren, but it was after a couple of seconds that the guy had already walked out. While you were still on the couch? No, sir. Okay. While you were in the kitchen? Yes, sir. That is when you yelled out for Darren? That is the first time? Yes, sir. In talking to Dr. Clayton yesterday, who is Glenn? I really don't know Glenn that well. Glenn was somebody that came into the shop. I think that he knew one of the men that works beside our shop. Okay. And he had come in and he had said some things to Barbara, and they weren't very nice things. And I guess his wife was having some problems with that. And his wife called and I told her that what he did. You told his wife? Yes, sir. When was this? This was about 1.5 years ago. Okay. And then what happened? Did he threaten you in some way? Yes, he threatened me later over the phone. Okay. How long ago was this? It was about, not quite 1.5 years. Okay. And you say that you gave the police his name? I told them Glenn. I don't think I gave them the last name because I didn't know his last name at that time. What is his last name? Okay. Now Did you tell them this is guy that just threatened you, or did this guy look like the killer? Yeah, I just told them. They just asked me if there was anybody that we thought, they asked me and Darren together at one time if there was anybody that we thought, had ever threatened us or anything like that. You are not saying this Glenn guy did the killing, are you? I don't know. Well, does he look like the guy? Well, I have not really seen Glenn. Well, when you had seen him, did he look like him? Well, I haven't seen Glenn. Well, what does he look like? Glenn? Yes, I don't know. You don't know what he looks like? Not to give you a detailed description. No. You have never seen him before? No. I saw him when we walked in to go and to talk to Baja, but that was a year and a half ago, and I really wasn't paying that much attention. Okay. So you really don't know what this Glenn guy looks like? Not really. No, sir. We have people walk in and out of our shop. Okay. You can't tell us if he is a tall guy or short guy or fat guy or skinny guy? No, sir. So you don't know if he would look anything like this man you saw walking away? No, sir. Okay. So you just told the police this Glenn guy had threatened you at some points in the past. Yes, sir. Do you think you would recognize Glenn if you saw him again? I don't know. Well, we will give it a try. Okay. Mr. Shook then says, y'all come on up here, please. And at this point, Chris Frosh and Glenn enter the courtroom, and the proceedings were then resumed on the record. Mr. Shook says, all right, y'all just come on up here, please. All right, stand right here for me, please. Okay. And then Mr. Shook again begins his questioning. All right, do you recognize him as being Glenn? Yeah, but the hair looks longer. Okay, but this is Glenn. I guess so. Okay. Mr. Shook then says, if y'all could just, I don't want to make it like a beauty pageant, but if you could turn around with your backs to the jury and also to Mrs. Routier. And the witnesses say, okay. Mr. Shook then says, all right. They don't really have the same build, do they? No, sir. So can we eliminate Glenn Mize as being the one? I think so. Mr. Shook then says, okay, all right, y'all can go on back. Thank you. Mr. Shook then continues. All right, so we got Darren out and we got Glenn out. Yes, sir. Okay. Do you remember on the 18th going to the Rowlett Police Department and talking to a man by the name of Bill Parker? Yes, sir. A private detective, retired Dallas homicide officer? Yes, sir. Do you remember how long you talked to him? About 2 hours. Okay. You and him were in a room there at the Rowlett Police Department? Yes, sir. Okay. And during the course of that conversation, he read you your Miranda rights, didn't he? Yes, sir. Mr. Hagler of the defense says, excuse me, Your Honor, could we approach the bench? And the court says you may. And then a short discussion is held off of the record, at which time the proceedings were resumed. Mr. Hagler, again of the defense, says, Your Honor, could we have just a second, please? And the court says, oh, by all means, yes. Members of the jury, if you will please step back in the jury room briefly, please. So the jury is excused from the courtroom and the proceedings are held in the presence of the defendant and her attorney, but outside the presence of the jury, as follows. And the court says, let the record reflect that these proceedings are being held outside of the presence of the jury and that all parties in the trial are present. If we can get directly to the point, please, gentlemen. Mr. Shook says, yes, sir. The court says, okay, now listen to these questions carefully and just answer them as straight as they come. Okay? The witness says, yes, sir. The court says, all right, thank you. All right, Mr. Shook. And Mr. Toby Shook says, yes, sir, and continues questioning Darlie. And again, remember, at this point, the jury is not in the room. Do you recall in talking to Mr. Parker that he accused you of killing your children on 6 different occasions? And when he did, that you answered, quote, if I did, I don't remember it? No, sir, I did not say that. You didn't say that on any of the times? No, sir. You never said that to him? No, sir. Whether it was 1 time or 6 times, you never said that to him? I never said that I don't remember. Okay. Mr. Toby Shook says, that is the statement that I wanted to ask Mrs. Routier about. And the court says, and that occurred when? Mr. Shook says, oh, also, Judge, just so we don't have to have another hearing. The other thing is, do you recall Mr. Parker asking you if everything here in your voluntary statement was true and correct? And Darlie responds with, if Mr. Parker asked me that? Mr. Shook says, yes. I don't remember him asking me that. And you don't recall reading over this statement in front of him? No, sir. He had an arrest warrant affidavit with him. That's all he had with him that I saw. You never read over the voluntary statement? No, sir, not with Bill Parker. Okay. Mr. Shook says, that is another question I had. And the court said, she had been Mirandized? Mr. Davis says, yes, sir. And the court says, okay. Mr. Hagler? Mr. Hagler then says, well, Your Honor, she was, from what I understand, the arrest warrant had already been issued. She was at the police station. She was, although unbeknownst to her, she clearly was in custody. Therefore, the provision 38.22 are going to be applicable, Your Honor. And apparently they are going to attempt to argue here that this will be some type of impeachment. And I don't think that they have laid the proper predicate for the impeachment. And furthermore, apparently, I'm not sure at one point in time she made these statements, but there are certainly some issues as to whether or not these statements that she understood what the interrogation was about and whether or not she freely and voluntarily made the statements. And we would object to going into any matters while she was in custody. Clearly, there was an arrest warrant out for her. So these are all custodial statements. And the court says that is correct, but she had been Mirandized. Mr. Davis says, yes, sir, she had. And the court says, all right, okay, fine. The court is overruling your objection. And I assume you want a running objection. Mr. Hagler of the defense says, yes, Your Honor. And the court says, you may have it. Let's bring the jury back in. And at this point, the jury is then brought back in to the courtroom and everything is resumed on the record. And Mr. Shook continues his cross-examination. Do you recall talking with a man by the name of Bill Parker at the Rowlett Police Department on the 18th of June? Yes, sir. Okay. And did he show you your voluntary statement? No, sir. Did he show you the voluntary statement and ask you to read over it? No, sir. Did he ask you, do you want to make any changes in this voluntary statement? No, sir. The only thing I saw from him was an arrest warrant affidavit. So you are saying that he never showed you any voluntary statement? He did not ever show me my voluntary statement. And you didn't read over it in front of him? No, sir. Okay. And while you talked to him during that interview, at least 6 times, he accused you of killing your children. And in each response to him, you said, quote, if I did it, I don't remember it. No, sir. You never said that? No. Okay. Not once, not twice, not 6 times. I never said that. Okay. And 76-A, this is your voluntary statement, isn't it? Let me see it. Is that your statement? Yes, sir, it is. And you wrote that out in your own handwriting? The day before the viewing? Yes, sir. Right. Down at the Rowlett Police Department? Yes. How long did it take you to write this out? I really don't remember. I know that I was there a total of almost 3 hours. Okay. It's 10 pages, isn't it? If you say so, yes. Okay, well, take a look at it. Let me just see that last page. Yes, 10. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. And did you write it out all in one sitting? Just sit down and start writing? Yes, sir. Okay. Was Detective Patterson asking you questions? He asked me questions before. Okay. But while you wrote it out, you just sat there and wrote it? Just wrote questions. All 10 pages? I mean, I just wrote. Yes, sir. You knew it was real important to get all this information down, didn't you? No, sir, I did not. You didn't think it was important? Not in the way that they are saying it's important. I mean, don't you think it was pretty important if a detective on the case is asking you to write down what happened that night? Sir, at that time, All I was concerned with was getting to the viewing to see my boys. Well, you wrote 10 pages. Yes, sir, I did. Okay. And that is not, if you look at that and you compare that to my normal handwriting, you can tell that is pretty sloppy. Okay. We know that in this voluntary statement that you never mentioned going to the kitchen sink. Do you? No, sir. There's a lot of things in there that are not mentioned, I believe. All right. Well, we will get to some of those, but as far as going to the kitchen sink, wetting towels, that is never mentioned in here. I believe there is mention about getting towels, but wetting towels? No, sir. That is not mentioned in there. Is it? No, sir. Okay. Going to the sink? No, sir. The sink is not mentioned anywhere in here, is it? No, sir. Of course, at that time, you didn't know that the police had taken your kitchen sink, had you? No, sir. You didn't find that out until they released the house back to you? Well, actually, we were in the house that night, but I didn't even recognize it that night. You didn't recognize the sink gone? No, sir. Didn't make any mention of the sink being gone? No, as a matter of fact, I mentioned something to Chris Frosh about going to the sink, and when did you do that? Mr. Mulder says, "Excuse me, Judge, if he will just do her the courtesy of, we have been very patient, if he will just do her the courtesy of letting her complete her answer." The court says, "All right, that is fine. Let her complete her answer. Did you have anything else to say to that?" The witness says, "Yes, sir." And the court says, "All right, well, go ahead and say it." The day the house was released, Chris Frosh was standing, I believe he was in the, whatever you guys call it, in the living area, the den, the family room. He was standing in the family room with me and Darren. And I had realized that I had gone to the sink and had gotten towels out of the drawer. And I told him that. Mr. Shook then says, "That is the first time that you mentioned that?" "Yes, sir." "But you didn't mention it here in your voluntary statement?" "No, sir." "Okay. Of course, you didn't know how important it might be if the police discovered that there might be some cleanup over there at the sink?" "I didn't think any of that stuff was important." "Okay. You also don't mention leaning on the vacuum cleaner at all, do you?" "No, sir." "You don't mention the vacuum cleaner anywhere?" "No, sir." "Don't mention having to hold on to it like a cane?" "No, sir." Of course, at that time, you didn't know that your blood had dripped on it while it was standing. At that particular time, no, sir. And you didn't know that your blood also was shown on it when, sir, there were a lot of things that happened that night that I didn't know of. Excuse me. And you had no idea that the police could later discover that blood, your blood drops, could be found on this vacuum cleaner in such a way that you deposited that, sir, my blood was everywhere in that house. Could I finish my question, please? Yes, sir. You had no way of knowing that at that time the police would be able to go in and find that you had put blood on this vacuum cleaner, that it had dripped while it was laying on the floor. You didn't know that, did you? I'm not sure. I didn't know. You didn't know that they could do that, did you? That they could see blood on a vacuum cleaner? That they could tell that you had been standing over it while the vacuum cleaner was laying down. I mean, you are not a blood spatter expert, are you? No, sir, I am not. Okay, and you didn't know that they would be able to tell that your blood was deposited on this vacuum cleaner while it was standing up also, did you? No, sir. And you didn't know that they had found the vacuum cleaner laying in the floor, but more importantly, what was underneath were your bloody footprints? I later found that out, yes, sir. But at the time you made the statement, this 10-page statement, you didn't know that, did you? No, sir, I didn't know any of this stuff. Okay. I didn't think it was important. And back on the 8th of June, when you wrote out your 10-page statement, you didn't mention going over to your son, Devin, did you? No, sir. We're not going to find that anywhere in here, are we? No, sir. Okay. I mean, you mentioned laying a towel on Damon, You mentioned that in here, don't you? I believe so. Okay. But you never mentioned going to Devin and putting a towel on him? No, sir. Or leaning over to Darren? No, sir. There's too many things to remember that happened that night. You talk about Darren giving CPR to Devin in here, don't you? I don't know, did I? You describe it, don't you? I don't know. Well, you can take a look and see. It should be towards the back. About Darren? About Darren performing CPR on Devin? Quote, the paramedic came in and tried to work on the children, and Darren was screaming, quote, who did this? Prior to that, do you mention Darren going to the aid of your children? Okay, yeah, it's right here. Okay. What did you say in that statement? Darren started giving Devin CPR while I put a towel on my neck and a towel over Damon's back. Okay. So you thought it was important enough when you were writing that statement to put that you put a towel on Damon and that Darren was giving CPR, but you didn't bother to write in there that you yourself went over and put a towel on Devin, did you? Sir, I didn't know what was important and what was not important at that time. Okay, well, you left it out? Yes, sir. Okay, now you say in that statement that you had laid a towel on Damon. Do you mean you laid it across his back? Yes, sir. While he was laying there on the floor? Yes, sir. Okay, you didn't bend it down and apply pressure to his back, though, did you? No, sir. You just laid it across his back? Yes, sir. Okay, this is after you had wet it, right? Yes, sir. Okay, so you just kind of laid it down on him? Yes, sir. What good would laying a towel down on his back do? Sir, I didn't know what I was doing. You didn't know what you were doing? I mean, for that to have any effect at all, you would have to put pressure on it. You would have to hold it, wouldn't you? I was trying to do the best that I could in the situation that I was in. Okay. And you said that you wet the towel first. Yes, sir. Okay. Wet towels are not going to do a very good job in that situation. Well, I didn't know that. You didn't know that? No, sir. I have never had any medical training or CPR before. Well, your boys have gotten cuts on them. They have hurt themselves when they were growing up. Devin had gotten one cut before. Do you put wet Band-Aids or wet towels on them, or do you try to put a dry one on them to stop the bleeding? Actually, when Devin had his accident, I did put a wet towel on his head. Doesn't common sense tell you you have to put a dry towel on something like that? Sir, at that time, there was no common sense. Okay, well, you had enough common sense to put a towel on your wound, didn't you? Yes, I did. I mean, you put a towel right on your neck right away, didn't you? Well, actually, it was a couple of times. I know what it says in there, but it was after I had gone back and forth a couple of times. You didn't have any problem in the world figuring out that you needed to put a towel on your neck and apply pressure to stop that bleeding. No, sir, it was also a wet towel too. But you kept it on your neck, didn't you? It was on my neck. Yes, sir. The whole time, didn't you? I don't know if it was on my neck the whole time. While you were on the phone to 911, you kept that towel right to your neck? I'm not sure about that. You are not sure? No, sir. Well, we know you kept it on there some, didn't you? Yes, sir. I mean, that is why you couldn't apply any pressure to your son Damon, was because you had your hands full. Sir, I was running back and forth doing all kinds of things. One hand, you had the phone. Part of time, I had the phone like this. And she demonstrates. And the other hand, you had the towel right to your neck. Part of the time, yes, sir. You weren't about to let that towel go and reach down and try to stop the bleeding from your son, were you? Sir, I was doing a lot of things at once. Mainly with one hand, you were holding that towel some of the time. But you never applied pressure to Damon's wounds, did you? No, sir, I didn't. Okay. You also put in your statement that while all of this is going on, let's see, Darren, he is over there working on Devin, and yes, sir, and you have laid a towel down. I went over to Darren and helped with Devin. After I saw what Darren was doing, And then I came back again and laid the towel down beside Darren just on the floor. And you write in your statement, quote, I looked over at Darren and saw the glass table had been knocked halfway off and the flower arrangement had been knocked over. I think so. You remember that? Yes, sir. Okay, to some degree. Well, you remembered it enough to be able to write it down in your voluntary statement on the 8th. It's in there. Yes, sir. Okay, quote, I then stood up and turned around and saw glass all over the kitchen floor. You remember that, don't you? If it's in there, yes, sir. Your memory back on the 8th was that you saw all this glass on the kitchen floor. I did see some glass on the kitchen floor. While your son Damon is lying there bleeding and your husband was working on Devin, well, it was just a glance. It's not, then, quote, I tried to glance over to see if anything was out of place or if anything was missing. Yes, sir. You looked around to see if anything was missing? Well, when I was standing where the knife was placed, my jewelry was sitting right beside it, and that is what I saw. Okay. Why would you want to glance around to see if anything was missing? Because the officer, when he came in, told me that nothing was gone. Okay, so you wanted to look around for that? I didn't necessarily look around. It was like right there in front of my face. And you knew nothing was gone? As far as that, it didn't look like anything was gone. You said that several times on the 911 tape? Yes, sir. I was just responding to what the officer told me. Nothing is touched. Nothing is touched. I think he said there is nothing gone. I think those were his words. And your interpretation of the 911 tape is that you never used the word that, quote, I was fighting. Is that right? No, sir, you can hear it. Your interpretation is you were frightening. I was frightened. Frightened. If you say it like that, but when you are running back and forth and you are out of breath, okay, let me take a moment. Maybe I can use one of these. All right. What page? 5. Okay. About the middle of that page before we get to that. Yes, sir. You are saying, I believe, quote, some man came in, stabbed my babies, stabbed me. I woke up, unquote, and your version is I was frightening. Yes, sir. Frightening. Yes, sir. And he ran out and threw the knife down. Yes, sir. Of course, our version was, quote, I was fighting. Well, you can listen to it. Of course, if you said, quote, I was fighting, that would indicate that you remember what was going on, right? I'm not sure. Well, if you were able to say on the 911 tape, I was fighting him, that would mean you would have a memory of that attack, wouldn't it? Well, it does not necessarily mean that. It doesn't. I was talking to 3 different people at one time. But if you said on the 911 tape, if you said, quote, I woke up, I was fighting, and he ran through the garage, that would indicate that you do remember what was going on, wouldn't it? Well, sir, I don't think that it says fighting. Oh, no. I have listened to this tape a lot of times. But if it did say fighting, I don't think it does say fighting. If it did say fighting, wouldn't that indicate that you do remember? I don't think it does say fighting. I don't think it does say fighting. If it did say fighting, wouldn't that be an indication that you remember what was going on? I don't think that it does say fighting. Can I take that as a yes then? I think it says frightening. You were frightening? Yes, sir. You can listen to it. Oh, I have? I know you have. I have lots of times. So have I. The court then says, all right, let's just questions and answers, please. And at this point, I'm going to pause this because this goes on. The rest of the prosecution's questioning of Darlie goes on for quite some time. So I'm going to pause this right here. They move on to a little bit of a different subject, but you can tell that it's starting to get a little testy, right? So anyhow, yeah, let's close this right now and then move right into the recap. Okay, so the prosecution starts off by leading Darlie down the path of what she did for the business, the test neck business, and how she helped keep the books. But Darlie was really quick to point out that they actually also had a CPA for the company. He also made mention of her having someone help clean the home, that she had somebody come into the house to help her clean. Uh, when he asks her about the gate, and if she tested it after Darren had fixed it, she said that she didn't. Now that Darren had just said, "Hey, he fixed it," and that was good enough for her. So just think about everyday life here for a second. If you have a significant other or whomever, and they say that they had gone out to do something, are you going to then go out and check on it yourself as they did, or as if, they were some child whose homework that you had to go over? Of course not. If they said that they did something, you believe that they did it. The prosecutor then really goes into this gate about how Darlie would have known how to get in and out of the gate, even though it would stick on the concrete. And, I almost had to laugh because, well, of course she did. She lived there. Of course she knew how to get in and out of this gate. And then he goes into things like where she keeps her vacuum cleaners and why they weren't in closets, but instead were sitting in a particular room. And then goes on to say, quote, "You are pretty famous for having a neat house, right?" Again, this guy is just so petty. Anything that he can find that is 100% normal to anyone in everyday life, he turns into a criminal issue. And then just when I thought we were out of the woods with this song, the whole Gangster's Paradise song was brought up yet again. Good Lord. I think that if Darlie had parted her hair on a different side one day, he would use that as some kind of weird thing that had to have some kind of criminal intent to it as well. Now, when we get to the May 3rd diary entry, Darlie said that the pills that had been spoken about, these pills were still in a drawer. She did not have them sitting out. And then evidently she said that later I'm assuming she meant her and Darren, flushed them down the toilet. Now, after the prosecutor questions her persistently about it, he makes sure to mention it 9 times. I just want you to be aware of that 9 times in that short amount that he questions her about this letter, making sure that this jury has this firmly in their head. And I only know this because I have to censor this word each time it's said due to YouTube's guidelines. That it was interesting that Damon and Devin were allowed to go with their stepfather for a day or so. I think it was just a day on Mother's Day, about a month before the crime, when this is the guy who had attempted to Darlie when she was younger. Now, to be fair, we don't know the entire circumstances. It's been many, many years since this occurred to her, but so many things could have happened. It's really hard to say. We don't hear the rest of the story, so I can get where people might be a little, weirded out maybe about that. He then makes reference to the fact that Darlie was only with her children half of the day on Mother's Day, and then makes it out to be something terrible that she went out with other moms the night before Mother's Day, which is, again, petty. He asked Darlie if she attends church on a regular basis, and she says no. Now, to me, this is not a big deal, right? Everybody has their own ways of worshiping or not. But Texas is considered to be in the Bible Belt, where it might be frowned upon if you don't go to church on a regular basis. And I'm sure that the prosecutor wanted to be sure that he pointed that out, especially to those folks in the jury where they're having this trial in this small conservative town of Kerrville, Texas. Darlie again says that she is not the one who planned the silly string party. But then Mr. Shook starts asking if she went around, quote, the entire neighborhood, unquote, telling the kids and the parents that they needed to come to this party. She did say that she called them, which, I'm sure was incredibly difficult, but it was a necessity. But Mr. Shook wants her to admit that she was walking around her neighborhood knocking on everyone's doors when in fact she only did this to 3 homes. She's questioned on the window in the garage and how she believed that she closed it a couple of times that week, but also believes that it was partially open the day of the crime. It also sounded like that this window wasn't actually locked on a very consistent basis. He does ask her specifically about Darren and whether she believes that maybe it was her husband, but she testifies that he did not do this. And so the prosecutor states then that it has to be then either her or an intruder. And she is then asked if she had been stalked and talks about these phone calls, but that she, if you remember the phone calls that they were getting at home where somebody, they wouldn't actually just hang up, but somebody was on the other line and would never respond. But she didn't think much of them. She did say that Darren, when her neighbor Karen Neal, the nurse that lives directly across the street from them, had mentioned something to Darren about seeing this black car that she thought looked like it was just staring and looking at the Routier home. When Darlie is asked about this, she did say that Darren did not tell her about this black car. I kind of wonder if maybe Karen would have. I don't know. That's never been brought up. Now, as Mr. Shook talks about how is it possible that one witness was left alive, Darlie says that she's sure that he just thought that she was dead, which makes total sense. We then learn why Drake, being in his crib and moving around a lot, would keep Darlie up. All of us have our own images, right, of babies in cribs and what it sounds like when they move around and so forth and so on. Well, now we find out that the crib itself was on a hardwood floor and the crib was also on rollers. And yes, that would make quite a bit of noise, especially considering that Drake was a pretty good sized kid for his age. When Mr. Shook begins to grill Darlie about whether or not she would have defended her kids if she saw them being hurt, she does answer that she would, but then when asked if she would have yelled out or screamed, she mentions 3 times in separate questions, quote, "unless my mouth was covered." Now, to me, this is kind of an odd answer to give. Maybe the defense wanted her to mention this. I don't know. I just know that every time she said this, I just thought, gosh, it just seems so odd, right? I don't know how else to put it. But Darlie then said that she did yell for Darren a couple of seconds after the guy had already walked out. Now, remember how Darren had said that he heard the glass break? And that's initially what woke him up? And remember, he's upstairs. This is downstairs in the kitchen. This would have occurred before this yell that Darlie said that she did, this yell for Darren, just seconds after the guy walked out of the room. So why didn't Darren hear it? He could hear the glass. At least that's what he says. He could hear the glass all the way upstairs. But when Darlie is in roughly the same location, he doesn't hear her. So, did this even happen? Did Darlie even actually yell for him once while she was in the kitchen? Or did it happen, but Darren is just not mentioning it? And just to play devil's advocate here a second, if it were Darren and Darlie did holler for him seconds after the guy left, he couldn't have answered because he wouldn't have heard her. But he would have heard the glass break because he was there. Because the next thing that Darren says that he remembers was her screaming Devin at the bottom of the stairs. So again, just something that popped into my head. It was just like, well, maybe what if, right? All the what ifs. We then hear again about this guy, Glenn, who was interested in Basha or Barbara Javel. And we learn that when Glenn's wife called, Darlie told her what was going on, and Glenn became very angry about this. He had called Darlie and threatened her, evidently. Then in this, what I would assume was an incredibly surprise move, the prosecution brings in Glenn and Detective Frosch at the same time because Darlie has consistently said that the intruder had the same size and build as Detective Frosch, and then has Glenn and the detective stand right next to each other. And evidently there were no real similarities in either height or stature between the two. Darlie is then asked about when she spoke with Bill Parker at the Rowlett Police Department. And this happened to be on the day that she was arrested. She is asked if Parker had asked her 6 times if she killed her children, and she had said that, quote, "If I did it, I don't remember." She denies saying any of this. We also find out that at this point she has been Mirandized. So I'm not sure. Well, I'm assuming that what the prosecutor is referring to are her statements, are statements from Parker that Darlie then told him after she had been Mirandized. So she's already been told, hey, you have the right to remain silent, get an attorney. We all know the Miranda rights, right? So from what I'm gathering from this is that she had been read her Miranda rights and then went ahead and still continued to answer questions for this Detective Parker at the Rowlett Police Department. And evidently that one of these statements that she had said or said multiple times was, "If I did it, I don't remember." This is really all that they say. They don't bring out any recordings. They don't bring out any notation or notes. They don't, he's never been on the stand. So I'm just really not sure where they're going with this. I'm sure this will probably come up a little bit later. Again, I don't know. I'm just guessing. They then start talking about her written statement. Now, this would be the statement that she wrote out the day that she was released from the hospital and the same day as the visitation for the boys. And he picks apart her written statement, saying things like she didn't mention going to the kitchen sink, but says that she told Detective Frosch, who was there in the house along with her and Darren, and this is after the crime, and I believe Darren was with her, and that she remembers going to the sink. And Mr. Shook then takes her back and forth about what she didn't put in her statement. Now, remember, this statement that he's talking about is when she's been taken directly from the hospital and she is supposed to go to the viewing of her boys. Just imagine if you're in that situation. You've just gotten released. You need to go to a viewing of your children. And instead, you are told, nope, you've got to come in and you've got to go down to the police department and you've got to give us this full written statement. And she says, I believe that she was there for about 3 hours. But during part of this testimony, she also talks about how she didn't know that a dry towel would work better than a wet towel for the wounds, which, I have to say is really a little hard to believe. But the rest of her statement, where Mr. Shook picks apart everything that she didn't put in there, I get it. If you've ever read any of the books by John Douglas, who happens to be a former FBI agent, he's probably best known for his work in criminal psychology and profiling. He does talk about crime scene reactions and how there's a variety of different ways that people will respond. And one of them is called stress and trauma, and says that high levels of stress and trauma can impair memory encoding and retrieval. He explains that the way that the brain works is it prioritizes survival over detailed memory formation during life-threatening situations. He also says that this can lead to incomplete or altered memories, with some details being more accessible than others. I know that there's a lot of people who you're either on the for Darlie side or the against Darlie side, but one of the biggest arguments has always been that, hey, her statements are very inconsistent. And yes, this may be true, but so are Darren's. And the thing is that nobody is going to remember the same situation exactly the same way. Now, am I giving anybody a pass at this point? No. I am just making a point that I'm trying to remain right now as middle of the road as I possibly can, and just try and remain as objective about all of this as I possibly can. And the thing is that yes, I mean, it's going to differ no matter, 20 people can view like the same car accident and you will have 20 different versions as to what happened in that car accident. And everybody will believe that their version is 100% absolutely the correct way that everything happened. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. But the bottom line is, I know, I'm sure I've said this before. As a matter of fact, I know I have. But Mr. Shook, this prosecutor, this guy, I'll tell you, he has one goal, one, and that is to win this case. He doesn't care how he does it. He just wants to win. So he will pick apart everything that he can possibly think of. Even the fact that she doesn't have vacuums in a closet is something to be argued about and brought up in front of the jury for some reason. And anyway, just my little opinion. I've also said before, he creeps me out, still does. I'm just not getting a great vibe from this guy. So anyhow, I've talked long enough. That will do it for this episode. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. And please take a moment to subscribe to the channel no matter where you listen. And also be sure to check out the new Beach House 34 merch shop at Beach House 34. And that's 34, the numbers 34.shop. Thanks again, everyone. We will talk really, really soon. Bye for now.